Commander Vazrik stood on the command deck of the inevitable Victory, his four arms crossed in what his species considered the ultimate posture of authority. The battlecruiser represented the pinnacle of Concordat engineering, a gleaming testament to the superiority of their civilization. Its quantum phase shields could repel attacks from 3 different dimensions simultaneously, and its neutron disruptors could reduce a small moon to cosmic dust. Not that they ever needed to demonstrate such power. Most species surrendered at the mere sight of a Concordat vessel. Commander, sensors detect an unidentified craft entering Sector 9, reported Navigation Officer Luzak, her bioluminescent antennae flickering with mild interest. Readings suggest, oh, how quaint. It appears to be a human vessel. Vazrik snorted through his nasal slits, a sound that rippled across the command deck and caused several junior officers to vibrate their exoskeletons in synchronized amusement. Humans, the walking paradox of the galaxy, barely 2 centuries into their interstellar phase, yet already poking their fragile bodies into territories clearly marked as Concordat space. Display the vessel, Vazrik ordered, his primary eyes fixed on the main view screen while his secondary pair scanned the tactical readouts floating beside him. The image that appeared caused another wave of amusement to sweep through the bridge. The human ship looked like something a juvenile Concordat would design before learning proper engineering principles, all awkward angles and exposed propulsion systems. They call it the Dauntless Explorer, announced communications specialist Trikes, the tendrils around her speech organs rippling with suppressed laughter. Apparently, it's one of their newest vessels. Should I even bother raising our shields, Commander? Vazrik flared his neck membranes in the Concordat equivalent of an eye roll. Save the energy. They're weapons, if you can call them, that wouldn't penetrate the outer hull paint of this vessel, let alone our defenses. The tactical officer Biron, a relatively young Concordat who still possessed some measure of caution, nervously adjusted his uniform collar. Sir, protocol dictates we should at least issue the standard warning. The last planetary system we visited mentioned something about humans being unpredictable. Unpredictable? Vazrik's secondary eyes swiveled to fix Biron with a withering stare. The only unpredictable thing about humans is which part of their primitive technology will fail first. But very well. Issue the warning if it will make you feel better. Then prepare to demonstrate our overwhelming technological superiority when they inevitably ignore it. Perhaps we should capture this vessel intact. The Academy would appreciate another human artifact for the Museum of Primitive Cultures. As the bridge crew busied themselves with their tasks, none of them noticed the slight irregularity in the human ship's approach vector, nor the unusual energy signature that briefly flickered at its stern before disappearing from their sensors. After all, why would the mighty Concordat pay close attention to such an insignificant species? The standard warning transmission had been sent 10 minutes ago. 10 full minutes. And still the human vessel maintained its approach, completely ignoring the Concordat's demand to identify itself and change course. They're doing what? Commander Vazrik's voice rose to a pitch that made the bridge's crystalline control panels vibrate dangerously. His secondary eyes bulged slightly as he stared at the tactical display. Tactical Officer Biron triple-checked his readings, his exoskeleton clicking nervously. They appear to be zigzagging, sir. No consistent pattern. Our targeting systems can't establish a proper lock. That's absurd. Our targeting algorithms are designed to track objects moving at near light speeds. Vazrik's neck membranes inflated with indignation. Are you suggesting a primitive human craft is outmaneuvering the finest tracking technology in 3 spiral arms? Not suggesting, sir. Observing, muttered Biron, immediately regretting his candor as Vazrik's 4 arms simultaneously clenched into fists. From the science station came a soft, warbling sound that the Concordat recognized as a throat clearing. Science Officer Prell, who had remained conspicuously silent until now, rose from her station. Unlike most Concordat who favored the metallic blue uniform, Prell wore the distinctive purple robes of the Scientific Academy. Her exoskeleton showed signs of age, hatches dulled from exposure to countless research environments. "Perhaps I might offer some insight, Commander," she said, her voice carrying the distinctive lilting accent of someone who had studied off-world languages. "I've been analyzing human behavior patterns for the past 7 cycles." "Oh, wonderful," groaned Navigator Luzak from her station. "Here comes another lecture from the human lover." Her antennae flattened against her head in the Concordat gesture of dismissal. Prell ignored the jab. "Humans are not following any known tactical doctrine because they don't think like we do. Their neural pathways evolved under constant threat from predators on their homeworld. They're hardwired to be unpredictable." "Fascinating," Vazrik said with obvious insincerity. "And this relates to our current situation how, exactly?" Prell activated her personal datasphere, projecting a series of images that hovered in the air between her and the commander. "This is what happened to the Brakthi exploratory fleet last cycle when they encountered just 2 human vessels." The images showed the twisted, blackened remains of what had once been mighty warships. "And this," she continued, displaying another grim set of visuals, "is what remained of the Vordak mining operation after they attempted to claim an asteroid that humans had already marked for extraction." Communications specialist Trix's tendrils writhed anxiously around her speech organs. "Those are Vordak. Their defensive systems are only 1 generation behind our own." "The humans have a saying," Prell said quietly. "Appearances can be deceiving." "A primitive platitude," scoffed Vazrik, though his secondary eyes narrowed slightly as he studied the images of destruction. "Sir," called Ensign Kriz from his environmental monitoring station. The young Concordat's voice cracked with excitement, his first real crisis since being assigned to the inevitable victory. "The human vessel is now broadcasting music? Some kind of rhythmic sound with vocals." "Put it on speakers," ordered Vazrik. The bridge filled with the unmistakable sounds of a human rock anthem, the thundering bass making the deck plates vibrate. "Are they taunting us?" asked Luzak, her antennae now fully erect with bewilderment. "Sir, they're still not responding to hails," reported Trix. "But they've changed course again. They're now circling us?" Her voice rose in confusion as she checked her readings. At extremely close range. Impossible. Vazrik moved to her station, all 4 of his eyes widening as he viewed the sensor readings himself. "No ship can maneuver that precisely at those speeds." "Permission to raise shields?" asked Baran, his exoskeleton now chattering audibly with stress. Vazrik hesitated, 4 hands hovering over different command interfaces as he processed the situation. His pride warred with the growing unease in his primary digestive tract. "Commander," Prell's voice cut through his indecision. "There's something else you should know about humans. They have an unusual psychological trait. They enjoy being underestimated." "Raising shields would be an admission that we consider them a threat," Vazrik responded, his voice hardening. "The Concordat does not fear primitive species." "Energy spike," shouted sensor technician Frix. The usually silent officer suddenly animated. Frix's specialized sensory appendages, which extended from his forehead like delicate tendrils, were trembling violently. "I'm detecting unusual energy patterns from the human vessel. Nothing in our database matches the signature." "What kind of energy?" demanded Vazrik. "Unknown, sir," Frix replied, his trembling appendages now glowing faintly. "But it's increasing exponentially, and it's focused directly at us." Vazrik's secondary eyes met Prell's knowing gaze, and for the first time in his distinguished career, the commander of the inevitable victory felt something entirely new, the doubt. Fire warning shots. Pattern Delta 6. Commander Vazrik's order cut through the tension on the bridge like a plasma blade through atmospheric gas. "Show these humans the consequences of ignoring Concordat warnings." The weapons officer, Lieutenant Maxis, practically purred with delight as her 6-fingered hands danced across the weapons console. "Neutron pulse primed and firing, Commander. This should give those primitive apes something to think about." The inevitable Victory shuddered slightly as three brilliant pulses of energy erupted from its forward array, streaking toward the human vessel in a precisely calculated pattern designed to bracket the ship without hitting it directly. A warning shot with Concordat flare, beautiful, deadly, and impossible to ignore. Except the human ship did ignore it. Or more accurately, it wasn't where the shots were supposed to land. In the milliseconds it took for the energy pulses to travel the distance between the ships, the human vessel had somehow shifted. They moved, stammered Lieutenant Maxis, her confidence evaporating faster than water on a desert planet. How did they anticipate our firing solution? Vazrik's primary eyes narrowed dangerously. Fire again. Full targeting spread. Before Maxis could comply, sensor technician Fricks let out a high-pitched alarm call that made everyone on the bridge flinch. Commander, the human vessel is opening up. On the main view screen, the seemingly primitive human ship was transforming. Panels that had appeared to be standard hull plating were sliding aside, revealing weapons ports. Lots of weapons ports. The awkward angles that had provoked their ridicule now revealed themselves as brilliantly disguised weapons systems, each swiveling to target the inevitable Victory with unerring precision. By the first egg, whispered Navigator Luzak, her bioluminescent antennae now dimming with fear. Those aren't exploration tools. Incoming transmission, announced communications specialist Trikes, her voice rising an octave. The humans are hailing us. On screen, ordered Vazrik, unconsciously straightening his posture. Even in crisis, Concordat dignity must be maintained. The view screen shifted to display the interior of the human vessel. Unlike the sterile, efficient design of Concordat ships, the human bridge was a riot of color and seemingly chaotic activity. And at the center stood a human female, her lips curved in what Vazrik recognized from his cultural briefings as a smile, though this particular expression contained no warmth whatsoever. This is Captain Eliza Morgan of the Earth Defense Force vessel Dauntless Explorer. I must say, Commander Vazrik, your warning shots need work. Perhaps you should have your targeting systems recalibrated? Vazrik felt his neck membranes deflate in shock. How do you know my name? And our internal communications frequencies? Captain Morgan's smile widened fractionally. Oh, we've been monitoring your communications since we entered this sector. Your encryption is quaint. Almost nostalgic, really. Reminds me of what we used about 70 years ago. Science Officer Prell moved closer to Vazrik, whispering urgently, Commander, if they've broken our encryption, that means we know all about your plans for Sector 9, Commander, interrupted Captain Morgan, her smile gone now, including your intention to establish a forward military base on HD 7293 billion. A planet, I should mention, that falls well within Earth's recognized territorial boundaries according to the Galactic Charter. The Concordat acknowledges no such boundaries, Vazrik replied stiffly, though his secondary eyes darted nervously toward Tactical Officer Biron, who had begun frantically checking their defensive systems. And the Galactic Charter is merely a suggestion for lesser species. Captain Morgan leaned forward slightly. Is that so? Well then, allow me to make a suggestion of my own. Withdraw from this sector immediately, or I'll be forced to demonstrate exactly how lesser the human species is. Tactical Officer Biron's exoskeleton was now chattering so loudly it was becoming difficult to hear. Sir, the human vessel it's everywhere. Our sensors show it somehow circling our ship at speeds that should tear it apart. On the view screen, Captain Morgan glanced at something off camera and nodded. That would be our phase shift drive engaging. Allows us to partially exist in multiple spatial locations simultaneously. Still working out the kinks, truth be told. Sometimes it makes the crew a bit nauseated. Impossible, shouted Vazrik, all four of his arms gesticulating wildly. Such technology violates fundamental laws of physics. Only the ones you know about, replied Morgan with a casual shrug. We've found that physics gets much more interesting when you push it hard enough. Science Officer Prell moved to the sensor station, her purple robes swishing as she analyzed the readings herself. Commander, they're generating some kind of quantum field around our ship. It's interfering with our shield harmonics. Ah, you noticed our quantum entanglement net, said Morgan, now examining her fingernails with theatrical boredom. Handy little invention. Essentially rewrites your shield frequency faster than your systems can compensate. Give it about 30 seconds, and your mighty shields will be about as effective as tissue paper in a hurricane. For the first time in his career, Commander Vazrik of the mighty Concordat felt a sensation creeping up his spine that he had heard described but never experienced personally, a pure, unfiltered, primal fear. Cut transmission, he ordered, his voice cracking slightly. The human's face disappeared from the screen, replaced by the external view of their ship, or rather the blurred, multiple images of their ship, as it somehow existed in several places at once around the inevitable victory. Options, demanded Vazrik, looking from one bridge officer to another. Someone give me tactical options. But the bridge crew of the inevitable victory, the pride of the Concordat fleet, had no answers. Only Science Officer Prell spoke, her voice soft but clear in the stunned silence. I believe, Commander, that the human phrase for our current situation is we're screwed. Where did they go? Vazrik's voice had lost all pretense of command authority, rising to a near shriek as he stared at the main view screen. The human vessel, the vessel that had been practically dancing circles around the inevitable victory moments before, had simply vanished. Sensors detect nothing, Commander. Sensor Technician Fritz's sensory appendages were now fully extended, quivering frantically as they searched for any trace of the human ship. It's as if they simply ceased to exist. Science Officer Prell hunched over her station, her aged exoskeleton creaking with the sudden movement. That's not possible. A ship that size can't just disappear. They must be using some kind of... A violent shudder rocked the inevitable victory, throwing several crew members from their stations. Warning klaxons blared across the bridge as red emergency lighting bathed the command deck in an ominous glow. We're hit. Port side, decks 7 through 12. Tactical Officer Biron's exoskeleton was chattering so violently now that his words were barely intelligible. But there's nothing on sensors. Nothing at all. Another impact rocked the ship, this time from the starboard bow. Impossible, screamed Vazrik, all four arms grabbing onto his command chair for stability. They can't attack from multiple vectors simultaneously. And, sir, Communications Specialist Trax's voice cut through the chaos. I'm detecting communications between multiple human vessels. Not just one ship, there are at least 4 of them out there. The main view screen flickered to life without anyone activating it. Captain Morgan's face appeared, now wearing an expression that the crew of the inevitable victory instinctively recognized as dangerous, despite their limited understanding of human facial expressions. Apologies for the theatrics, Commander, she said, not sounding apologetic in the slightest. But we needed to demonstrate a point. The dauntless explorer isn't alone. In fact, she's just the bait. The view screen split into quarters, showing Morgan in one section and 3 other human captains in the others, all wearing identical expressions of calm confidence that somehow felt more threatening than any display of aggression. Allow me to introduce Captains Naresh, Blackwood, and Tanaka, Morgan continued, gesturing to her colleagues. We've been trailing your fleet movements for months now. Your invasion plans for Sector 9 are, well, let's just say they're now as obsolete as your technology. Vazrik opened his mouth to respond, but at that moment, every system on the bridge flickered simultaneously. The holographic displays that were the pride of Concordat engineering dissolved into meaningless static, then reformed, showing incomprehensible human text scrolling rapidly across every screen. What's happening? Vazrik demanded, turning to his engineering officer. Lieutenant Graz, who had been desperately trying to stabilize the ship's systems, looked up with 4 eyes wide in horror. They're inside our network. Something called Project Trojan Horse is rewriting our core systems. A little gift from Earth's Cyber Warfare Division, explained Morgan, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. Right now, it's cataloging all your tactical databases, weapons specifications, and fleet deployments. Oh, and it's also taking control of your life support systems. Just as a precaution, you understand. As if to emphasize her point, the temperature on the bridge suddenly dropped 10 degrees, causing the cold-sensitive Concordat crew to shiver violently. "You can't do this," Vazrik bellowed, frost forming on his neck membranes. "This violates every protocol of civilized warfare." Captain Tanaka, an older human with silver hair, leaned forward in his quarter of the screen. "Funny, we were just about to say the same thing about your planned bombardment of civilian colonies in Sector 9. With dawning horror, Vazrik realized they had accessed the sealed battle plans that even most of his own crew weren't aware of. In desperation, Vazrik lunged for the emergency weapons override panel hidden beneath his command chair, the last resort that would bypass all safety protocols and fire every weapon on the inevitable victory simultaneously. His upper right hand had just touched the panel when it shocked him with enough force to send him sprawling across the deck. "I wouldn't," said Captain Blackwood mildly from the view screen, holding up what appeared to be a primitive human tablet. "We've rewired that particular system to respond only to human authorization codes now. Quite simple, really. Your entire software architecture has more back doors than a cheap apartment complex." Vazrik struggled to his feet, his dignity in tatters along with the Concordat's reputation for technological superiority. What do you want?" Captain Morgan's expression softened slightly. "Surrender your vessel, Commander, now. Or we'll be forced to demonstrate what our ships can really do when we're not just playing around." And in that moment, as four supposedly primitive human vessels decloaked around his mighty warship, each targeting a critical system with weapons that his sensors still couldn't properly analyze, Commander Vazrik of the Galactic Concordat finally understood the most terrifying truth of all. The humans had been toying with them from the very beginning. The formal surrender of the inevitable victory took place in the ship's Grand Assembly Hall, a space designed to intimidate visiting dignitaries with its soaring ceilings and imposing statuary of Concordat military heroes. Today it served only to make the defeat feel that much more catastrophic. Commander Vazrik stood rigidly at attention, his forearms held precisely at the formal surrender position, upper pair crossed at the chest, lower pair extended palms up in supplication. Behind him, his senior officers mimicked the pose, their exoskeletons occasionally emitting soft clicks of distress. The airlock cycled open, and Vazrik braced himself to face the towering, muscular warriors he assumed would be boarding his vessel. Instead, Captain Eliza Morgan strolled in, flanked by her officers. Vazrik blinked all four eyes rapidly in confusion. The humans were small, soft-looking. Their bodies lacked any obvious defensive structures, and their limbs were laughably insufficient, just 2 arms and 2 legs. How had such physically unimpressive creatures brought the mighty Concordat to its knees? "Commander Vazrik," Captain Morgan greeted him with a nod. "I accept your surrender on behalf of the Earth Defense Force. Your crew will not be harmed, provided they cooperate fully." Vazrik performed the elaborate Concordat surrender ritual, a complex series of gestures involving all 4 of his arms that took nearly a full minute to complete. Morgan watched with raised eyebrows, then glanced at her first officer. Did he just have a seizure, or was that intentional? "I believe that was their surrender protocol, Captain," the first officer whispered, consulting a small device in his hand. Vazrik's neck membranes flushed deep purple with embarrassment. That was the sacred 17 movements of honorable capitulation, a ritual dating back 12,000 cycles. "Right," Morgan nodded politely. "On Earth, we usually just sign a document. It's much faster, less chance of pulling a muscle." One of the human officers snickered, quickly disguising it as a cough. "There is one thing I don't understand," Vazrik said, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his humiliation. "If you possess such advanced technology, why did you approach in what appeared to be a primitive vessel? Why not simply demand our withdrawal immediately?" Morgan's expression softened slightly. "Because we weren't looking for a fight, Commander. The Dauntless Explorer is genuinely a research vessel. We came to establish diplomatic contact. The weapons and defensive systems are precautionary given how often first contacts go sideways. Then all of this humiliation was unnecessary." Vazrik's secondary eyes narrowed in confusion. "We repeatedly tried to open standard diplomatic channels," Morgan explained, displaying a log of communication attempts on her tablet. "Your vessel ignored 47 separate hails before firing on us. At that point, protocol shifted from diplomatic contact to defensive response." Science Officer Prell stepped forward, her aged voice quavering slightly. "Our communication systems are programmed to filter out transmissions considered beneath Concordat dignity, but your signals were likely categorized as unworthy of attention." Morgan's eyebrows shot up. "You built an automatic ignore function into your communications? That's spectacularly arrogant." "Yes," Vazrik admitted quietly, the full weight of realization crashing down on him. "It appears we have been spectacularly arrogant in many ways." Captain Nerish joined them, his dark eyes scanning the assembly hall. "Captain, initial scans complete. Their technology is advanced in some areas, surprisingly primitive in others. Interesting mix." "That tracks with what we've found throughout Concordat space," Morgan replied. "Lots of impressive weapons, not much innovation in communication or cooperation." Vazrik felt his exoskeleton tighten with shame. "What happens now? Will our worlds become human colonies?" Morgan actually laughed at that. "Good grief, no. We have enough trouble managing the colonies we already have. Besides, Earth isn't in the conquest business." She held out a small data crystal. "These are the coordinates for a diplomatic summit next month. The Galactic Concordat is invited to send representatives to discuss joining the United Worlds Alliance. We'd much rather have you as partners than enemies." Vazrik accepted the crystal with stunned disbelief. "After all this, you offer alliance?" Morgan's smile disappeared, her eyes suddenly hard as space itself. "Don't mistake pragmatism for weakness, Commander. Earth has 47 colony worlds, 16 fleet staging areas, and over 300 ships more advanced than the ones you've seen today. We prefer peace, but we excel at war. Remember that. Should the Concordat ever consider aggression toward human space again?" As the humans departed to continue their inspection of his vessel, Commander Vazrik of the once mighty Inevitable Victory was left with a single, humbling thought. The galaxy had suddenly become a much larger, much more dangerous place, and the Concordat had never been the apex predator they'd believed themselves to be.